afternoon and welcome to the October 17th Council Work Session. And just a note for everybody, it's probably clear to you, we have a slight change in the agenda. We'll be talking about, we'll have the Gordon Lofts MUPD conversation first, and then we will have a conversation about a temporary day center and dusk to dawn pilot. And the police commission is moved to a later date. So we will now begin with the Gordon Lofts MUPD conversation.
I'll turn over to Denny and his team.
Afternoon, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Michael Kennison, the Director of Community Development, and I'm joined by Denny Bro, our Director of the Planning and Development Department, and Amanda Noble Flannery, our Economic Prosperities Program Manager. And we're here to talk today with you about the Gordon Lofts application for a multi-unit property tax exemption. Amanda's going to provide you a program overview and review the results of the MUPD review panel and conclusions of the independent financial analysis. We're carrying forward the review panel's recommendation for a 10-year exemption, and there is a resolution to that effect in your packet, so you may take action today if you choose. However, you are by no means required to act today. We simply wanted to have everything ready to provide you that option if you chose to. We realize you've been provided a lot of information to digest, and we're here today to do our best to clarify any questions that you have. We are intentionally keeping our presentation brief in anticipation of a robust conversation that will follow. If you recall, the last time we were here with a MUPD for your consideration was July of 2016 with the Olive Lofts project, which recently entered the permit phase, but the developer is still working to get financing together for that project. At that time, Denny noted the challenge of building market rate multifamily housing in our downtown core, given market conditions. That is still the case, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a construction boom. Naturally, we're very excited to see the prospects of a project of this size being proposed, given the ambitious goal we've set for ourselves of 1,000 new multifamily units built in the core of our downtown to accommodate our future growth. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Great. MUPD is an incentive program for high-quality multi-unit downtown housing of more than 5 units. It cannot include transient accommodations, and student housing is ineligible. The property tax exemption is on qualified investments approved by council within a specific area. Generally, that's the downtown plan boundary. In 2015, after a 2.5-year review, Council extensively revised the program criteria, the process, and the boundary. A description of how the program changed was in your packet for today as Attachment A. Council added 2 aspects for third-party review. The MUPD review panel reviews applications, approved projects, and does an annual program review. There's also an independent financial consultant review to the application. The application process highlights are the neighborhood contact that happens before the application is submitted, a 30-day written comment period, and then the financial consultant and MUPD review panel. These are the 7 required public benefits for the program that are in the ordinance. One of the objectives was to create some certainty on what the program requirements are. All applications have to meet all 7 of these. In the context of the Gordon Lofts project, I'll go through each of them. Gordon Lofts is a proposed 7-story, $34 million mixed-use project. It has 6 floors of housing and 127 residential units. It has ground floor commercial space of about 10,000 square feet. The property is currently used as a surface parking lot. Gordon Lofts is part of a larger $85 million development, a concept that OB and Homes for Good worked together to create, all on property leased from the county. It includes a hotel, a commercial building, and affordable housing, the Market District Commons project, which is a 50-unit housing development for low-income households at 60% of area median income. Tax credits were recently approved on the affordable housing, and the hotel and Market District Commons are on a path to break ground early next year. Gordon Lofts is the subject of the MUPD request. Now let's look at how the project meets the required public benefits. Compact urban development is key to implement the downtown plan and envision Eugene. At 254 units per acre, the project is very dense. Gordon Lofts will use the building and permit services pathway to achieve the energy efficiency standard of being 10% better than required by code. They would be required to submit documentation of meeting this requirement after occupancy. The developer submitted a plan to address the local economic impact. The program goal is at least half of the professional services and construction contract dollars are local to Lane County. Gordon Lofts anticipates that approximately 70% of the construction dollars will be spent locally. They would be obligated to comply with wage, tax, and licensing laws and utilize avenues to promote opportunities with minority, women, and emerging small businesses. The moderate income housing contribution can be met by either paying a fee or by including units in the project. For including units, the program ordinance allows for units on contiguous lots, all owned by a single entity, or covered by a city-approved master plan. In this case, that would allow Gordon Lofts to meet the moderate income contribution with the Homes for Good units. However, OBs has voluntarily opted to pay the fee to meet this requirement. The project would pay 10% of the total exemption for the 10-year period, and that's estimated to be $400,000. Project design and compatibility reviewed by the panel and the city's urban design team. They had broad agreement that the building fits appropriately in scale and type with its surroundings, and that the mixed-use design engages the street and will contribute positively to downtown housing and commerce. Design changes were incorporated as a result of staff feedback, and the code does not require parking for new development in this area. These are the building elevations from different perspectives that are included as part of the resolution, and that Gordon Lofts' final design will be required to comply with. The project is adjacent to 3 properties that meet MUPD's definition for historic locale, but they are not affected by this project, and there was no existing housing on the site. The final public benefit is project need. PNW Economics, an economic consultant firm, provided a review of the financial information and pro forma. A pro forma is a prediction of future financial performance based on assumptions for key variables: rent, vacancy rates, interest rates, to name a few. The consultant said the rent assumptions of over $3 a square foot were not achievable and adjusted these down. The PNW Economics analysis in your packet as Attachment E concluded that the project would not be viable without the availability of the exemption. The review panel also reviewed the PNW Economics analysis. They noted that evaluating the project's financial need for the MUPD involves many variables that are hard to predict. Without a crystal ball, it's hard to pinpoint specific performance for the future. Let's look at the property tax revenue for this parcel. There's 2 potential outcomes that we explored. The property continues to operate as a parking lot, or the property is redeveloped as housing. So this is a graph of the estimated taxes over a 20-year period if the property stays as it is. It would be just over $6,500 for year 1, and by year 20 it almost doubles. If the property is redeveloped as housing, the estimate for years 1 through 10 stays the same. The year 20 estimate is $675,000, and the foregone revenue for years 1 through 10 is estimated at $4.3 million. The review panel met 3 times, provided a thorough review of the application and the PNW economics analysis. The panel concluded that the project meets the public benefit criteria and has a demonstrated financial need for the exemption. The panel recommended approval to the city manager for both the residential and commercial portions of the building. With varying opinions on the length, a majority recommended the 10-year exemption and a minority recommended a 3-year exemption. Attachment C has the panel's conclusions, and the written comments we received from the public through October 8th are Attachment F in your packet. Should council approve the resolution, the next steps would look like this to ensure that the project complies with the approval conditions outlined in the resolution. As a reminder, non-compliance would result in civil penalties, not getting the exemption, or termination of the exemption. With that, I'll pass it back to Michael.
So to close, based on the MUPD review panel's recommendation and the financial consultant's analysis, the city manager recommends approval of a 10-year MUPD with the terms and conditions in the resolution enclosed in your packet. Just to clarify, the resolution is for a project that includes 127 residential units with a mix of 69 studios, 53 one-bedroom, and 5 two-bedroom units. The project has not been designed primarily to serve college students, and none of the units are to be used for transient or vacation occupancy. The exemption also applies to the 10,000 square feet of ground floor commercial. And as mentioned earlier, whether or not to take action tonight is council's prerogative, and we can bring the resolution back for consideration at a future date if so desired. With that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. I have Mike in the queue already, and Claire. Anybody else right now? Okay, Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. I see a gentleman sitting in the audience who I'm reasonably certain had quite a lot to do with the last time somebody built housing in the downtown planning area of our community. And other than the Olive Lofts, which is planned, my question is actually building housing in the downtown plan area. What year was the last time that actually happened?
That's a complicated question, so I'll have to categorize. We've seen some student housing built downtown, obviously. We've seen some affordable housing projects like the Aurora, Westtown on 8th, but some time has passed from those projects. The
Market-based housing.
Market apartments, newly built from the ground up. I think the gentleman you're probably talking to was involved in Broadway Place, which was completed in 1999, so almost 20 years since that project.
After, I don't know, 8, 9 years, I guess, that we did envision Eugene, how many actual years did that take? We came to the conclusion that building densely in our core was what we most wanted to do, and living more densely in our core and not adding to the urban growth boundary was what we want to do. And we haven't actually built housing in 20 years downtown, and this is an opportunity to do it. And at the same time, get $400,000 right away to help with affordable housing. And I think it's a very good idea for us to do. I appreciate all the analysis that was done in the process of calculating if this conformed to all the vast work we did to revise the MUPD so that it provides for a public benefit of consequence, of substance. And based on everything that we did to redo that, I find that this meets that standard. So thank you.
Claire.
Thank you. Thanks for the report and the packet. So I'm inclined to support the 10-year exemption, but I do have some questions, which I'll get to in a moment. And I know there are members of this council and the public who don't support MUPD as a method for meeting council goals, but I think the prescribed and limited use of this incentive is appropriate, especially in this context. I think this particular project represents the very kind of project we need downtown, and towards which the MUPD program was designed to encourage with the many changes we made to it in 2015, I think it was. You know, it represents dense development in our downtown core, helping to reduce the pressure on expanding our urban growth boundary for housing. It helps meet our climate recovery goals, again, by reducing sprawl and encouraging non-car dependent lifestyles. And the property has been a vacant parking lot, used as a parking lot without any structures on it for many years, which is not really the highest value for a property in so close to the core of our downtown. So I do have a question about something I hadn't caught when I looked through the package, and that was the piece about the inclusion of the commercial development. So can you speak a little bit more about that? Because that's actually seems like a new piece to me that I just have missed it in past MUPD conversations.
Yeah, it's been in past MUPD conversations. I don't remember the year, but several years ago, the state actually changed the statutes to allow for this provision where ground floor commercial / retail would be eligible for the exemption if it's embedded in the building, obviously. The provision was that you had to demonstrate community benefit, a public benefit associated with that commercial. So in the the old Taco Time building, when the commercial was upgraded, that was exempt under the MUPD for that project. Trying to remember what other, the Broadway, or the Olive Lofts, I think, also included commercial, and that was included in their MUPD as well.
And the West Town on 8th, was that retail?
That's different tax exemption. That's a LRPD, low-income
Right.
housing tax exemption.
Right, which is different, okay.
And those were shared work living units, so I think they were actually considered to be living units, not commercial, as I recall. But
Right, they're connected with residents who occupy the building. Okay. And you mentioned that the applicant here has opted to do the payment to our Affordable Housing Fund, and that would be, if they were granted the full 10-year exemption, would be approximately $400,000. When would we, the city, when would our fund receive those dollars?
They have opted to want to pay it in the first year with a 5% discount, so it would be in the next 2 to 3 years after it's constructed.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, after it's constructed, so 2 to 3 years from now.
Okay, but not at the end of the 10 years tax exemption.
Right.
So in the first 2 years of the
They've opted, they want to
exemption.
pay it all up front, so in the first year, they would make the $400,000 payment.
Okay. And then I had a question, because there was a minority report in here that questioned some of the assumptions and how things were calculated, and made a recommendation for a 3-year exemption instead of 10. And I'm curious if the entire review panel had a chance to respond to that minority report and weigh in on that.
We had quite a lot of conversation at the review panel on back and forth on different perspectives on the results of the independent financial analysis. You know, I would say some of Amanda's remarks in a presentation from the review panel about, you know, that the panel feels a little challenged weighing in on the results of those analysis, because, you know, when we're very early
Results of which
in
analysis?
the financial analysis, because we're very early in the process. You know, a lot of the numbers, we don't have final construction costs, we don't have all the financing in place, and so that's why we have an independent financial analysis to help us vet what we think is reasonable, what seems to be within the realm of current market conditions and their past experience. So I think some of the differences is along that in that area of what some folks might think is possible, but I think that the majority of the panel felt like the independent financial consultant's analysis was reasonable. So they did certainly talk about it, debate that, and the majority of the panel agreed with the consultant's conclusions.
And so the total panel, how many members on the panel total?
There are 10.
10, and we had 2 that were part of the minority report.
That's correct.
Correct.
And then there was a concern about parking, because it's in the location that this is being built. There's not a requirement to provide parking, but the applicant did share their plans for providing some parking provision for those residents and leasing additional parking, I believe, another 75 spaces. So there's you know, at least some thinking, which I think is very important, into what the impact of removing the parking we have there now and then adding all of this activity. We are going to need to be thinking about parking for our eWeb development as well, even though our hope is folks. Oh, I apologize.
I was just trying to flag you. You can
I
take
will
a
stop.
second round.
Nope, I'm
Yep.
good.
I'll give you a second
you.
round if you need it. Okay, Chris.
It's easy for time to get away. I've done it many times. To follow up on the using a professional firm to try to guess what the future is going to be, and that's what you're saying. I mean, when you're talking about the future, it is a prediction. So what you want to try to do is get the best professional expertise you can when you want to make that guess about the future, and that's the sense I have of what we tried to do here. So while you can't be precise about it, you get the experience and the expertise of somebody to give you what they think would be that future. And based on their recommendation, this project really doesn't look like it would pencil out without this MUPD, is what their opinion is. And I realize, you know, 80% of the panel said that a 10-year exemption they agreed with because they went along with what this professional guess would be. So I'm willing to support that. Plus, $400,000 in an affordable housing fund is nothing to sneeze at. That really provides a good starting point for being able to create affordable housing. And I know they had originally talked about using the Homes for Good, and they could have tried that, but I think this is a demonstration that they really want to try to make that contribution for affordable housing. So I appreciate the $400,000. I was on the panel with Councilor Poling that revised the MUPD requirements, and I recognize we had a lot of conversation about the old MUPD criteria having a lot of holes in it. You didn't have to meet all the criteria in order to qualify. There were, you could weigh too heavily on one side versus the other. The community benefit was not necessarily clear. There was not necessarily a clawback provision or a way to provide, you know, sufficient oversight. And we systematically tried to close those gaps and create a true sense of a real community benefit for the project. And the fact that they meet all of the current criteria, which this council approved, I think is an important element here. We set the ground rules, and they have met them. And I think that's a significant piece of the conversation. We say, this is what you need to do if you want our support for a MUPD. And we created quite extensive requirements and approved them, and they have met all of those requirements. And I think the final thing I would add is we've had some concerns in the past about somebody coming in from out of town and throwing up a project like Capstone and then selling off and walking away. And is there really a commitment from these out-of-towners to really do the community benefit? And in this particular case, we're talking about somebody who has lived here, who served here for decade after decade after decade, has raised a family here. And I think that, is a significant element. That's somebody who knows this community, recognizes this community, and wants to do something to build what I will consider to be a major downtown project, a significant downtown project. And from that standpoint, I think we should grant them the exemption.
Thank you. Emily?
I'm not ready to vote on this. We just got the report on Thursday, Friday, and there's a lot of information in there. Along with Claire, I'd had a question about the rebuttal or the information with the minority reports, and I'm glad you discussed it. I would like to see what those answers are because I can't answer them without that. I'm wondering if we can get a copy of the original application. We haven't seen that. What does state-enabled mean?
This tax exemption program is enabled by state statutes, so we as a community don't grant property tax exemptions without some state legislation that allows us to do that, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong, but generally that's.
Okay, thank you. So my concern is, yes, we've got the community public benefits, and those are great, and I'm glad we have them. So it comes down to the last one. Does it pencil out? And according to the financial review, there's 4 scenarios. Without a MUPD and regular rates, it won't work. With a MUPD and regular rates, it won't work. Without a MUPD and the tiered apartment pricing, it won't work. With a MUPD and the tiered apartment pricing, it's implausible that it would work. So I don't understand how that analysis says to us it's a good gamble. Can you explain that?
Well, I think that on the, well, again, some of this goes back to trying to have a crystal ball and consider what is achievable with the rents, whether it's what we think right now is achievable based on the current market or what the OBs think they can get on the amenity-based rents. And so the consultant broke those analysis out. I think in the final analysis, with given if amenity-based income could be achieved, and with a MUPD, the project is still challenged, but I don't think that he concluded that it's not viable. I think what he did conclude is that for this to have a shot at getting investor equity and the financing that it needs, it's going to have a MUPD to move forward.
The word he used was implausible. That's not a good gambling word. So I would like more reassurance that it's really going to be effective. What happens if it's not effective? What if the rents don't meet the need to pay back the banks and the investors and the operating costs? Then what happens?
You know, the lending environment provides, and we do lending as well, so we make sure every project meets cash flow coverage ratios and loan-to-value ratios, and we always build enough flexibility for the worst outcome. You know, if they don't absorb the units quick enough, its interest rates go up, if construction costs goes up. And that's the hard thing about trying to predict how this project will perform when it opens 2 years from now, is we don't really know where construction costs are. We don't really know how fast they will fill up the units. We don't know what the lease rates will be. There's a lot of elasticity in those numbers, and so it does require a crystal ball that doesn't exist. We don't really know, and every time we've had this conversation, it's something we've struggled with, it's something council has struggled with, is we really don't know. When you get out in the weeds in the number, we really don't know what the real numbers are going to be because it's hard to predict. Interest rates are hard to predict, all of those things. So I think that's one of the reasons council moves towards the public benefit criteria, is that establish that regardless of what side you are on that issue, we have some public benefit criteria that provide opportunities for this project to deliver a better than average outcome as far as housing affordability and quality of the design and you know, density and energy efficiency and all of those things. And those are things I think you can actually get your arms around. When you get in the weeds of the numbers, it just gets really, really hard. We struggle with it. You guys struggle with it. It's a difficult place to be.
But a tax exemption is exactly that. It's about numbers. And this guess doesn't seem good to me if the final report is only one of them is implausible to work. In 10 years, those apartments won't be brand new, so they might not be getting top of the market price. Where was I?
Emily, one of the things I think also is that risk is really borne by the developer, and so the developer chooses to develop and market the project and receive the rent that they're able to receive. So even if the margin by that report would say it's implausible, the city is not assuming the risk in the way that the developer assumes the risk. If they can't get the rents, then they're the ones that are financially on the hook for that. The city isn't on the hook for them not getting their rents.
And if I can just add, if you look at the projects that have been built and been successful downtown, if you think about Broadway Place and the Tate and High Street Terrace, they've been built by what I would consider to be patient local investors who are willing to wait to get that return on investment. And so the other option would be a large, you know, developer who builds all over the country who can absorb some risk there. But generally speaking, local developers that are patient are in it for the long run, and maybe they don't need that return in year 2, 3, 7, and 8. Maybe they're willing to be more patient. And those are the projects that I think have been successful in the Tate and High Street Terrace. Those are all local families, and they've held them for a long time, and they're patient.
But we still wouldn't get any property tax, no matter how they were doing with their project being good for them.
We should correct that. We would. There's
Well,
still
the
paying
land
property
part, but not the building part.
If the building, just because they can't get the rents doesn't mean that they're not paying property tax. And so the value of the building still gets assessed as a property, for property tax. And if they can't fill them up, they're still obligated to pay property tax.
In 10 years.
Yes, in accordance with the MUPD, that's true.
So the 400,000 that we would get in 2 years, how much would that really buy? Because houses cost $200,000 a piece, so how many houses, how many units are we going to get for that $400,000?
I think it's, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It's how that $400,000 is leveraged with other sources of funds. So just as an example, we get HUD money every year. We get $1.2 million, and you would think that doesn't buy you a lot, but we produce hundreds of units with that HUD money because we leverage it with tax credits and other things, and we would intend to leverage this $400,000 with other tools and programs and state money and federal programs to really widen the impact of those dollars. So.
Just for an example, with Yalpoa Terrace, which is a $50+ million project right now to rehab that whole building, we contributed over $1 million to that, but it's a $50+ million building. So you can get a lot for providing that extra gap to make a project happen.
But it still is going to take money from the general fund for 10 years. And the people might not be driving cars, but they're still going to use the library and the paramedics and the police and the parks that everybody in the rest of the city has to pay for. So I like the building, I like the density, I like all the public benefits. But I don't feel that that last one has really been explained to me, and I would like those answers.
Okay. Betty.
Thank you. I still haven't seen the total list of the panel.
We have that. We'll send that to you.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. We actually produced it, but somehow it must not have gotten sent to you.
Somehow it didn't.
We saw your request. Sorry that didn't get to you.
Unless it came early this morning. I haven't looked at my email today. Okay. I don't know about banking or developing. Most of us here don't. But so I have to decide whose opinions I trust and whose arguments I trust. And I totally trust the two people who made the minority report. And I would like to know more about answers to the things that they said. And I don't have that yet. A couple of things that were just said that were interesting. High Street Terrace, I think that was built since Broadway Place, wasn't it?
They came online about the same time. I think High Street Terrace might have been a few months before Broadway Place.
I thought it was later. And then when you said the risk goes to the developer, that's where I think the risk should go. I think anyone in business is taking a risk, and they risk losing money, and they risk not making what they thought they would make. And I don't think it's up to us to guarantee a risk-free development. I like the looks of it too. If it were if it were 3 years, I might consider it, And if it were eliminating the commercial, I don't see how anyone could say that more commercial will benefit downtown. All you have to do is walk around downtown to see empty storefronts, lots of them. And I don't think we need more commercial competing with the people who own those properties downtown that they apparently can't rent. I agree with Emily, we need more time. And also I noticed that the contention that there wouldn't be a profit for a year or two, or that there might be a big vacancy. If there were not a need for that many units, I don't think the people would be building them. I think there's a big demand. The Amazon Crossing, which is out near where I live, is already being asked for, I think. They did not get a MUPTI, and they're building it. As far as I know, it looks, nobody's working there today. Maybe something happened, but it was going up fast, and people were already reserving spaces, I think. I do think there's a need for places, so I think it is not realistic to assume that there would be, I think I read a 20% vacancy for a year or two. If so, maybe it shouldn't be built. And did someone want to answer anything?
Well, I think what you're referring to is the absorption rate. So in any new project, any new kind of multifamily project, there takes a period of time before you don't open your doors on day one and you've got 100% occupancy. It takes time to fill that up. And so in the first 1 to 2 years, you're going to have a certain amount of what they call absorption, where you have rooms that aren't filled yet. And so the consultant looked at those and based on some of the feedback from in the committee, adjusted that absorption vacancy rate. And that's included in the materials that you have.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So I'm comfortable moving ahead with it today, if there are enough people. I really feel like this project is bringing things downtown that we've been saying we need: more housing, more people in the streets, more activity. These are all things we continually talk about. How are we going to bring people downtown? Well, if they're living downtown, they're already there, and they're going to spend their time and their money in the area. And it also, hopefully without cars in some cases, to cover some of that climate goals that we have as well. I also think, talking about risk, that this is a known developer in our community who has a vested interest in this exact area. So I'm sure they're being very diligent when they make their choices about how they're going to invest their money. Because if this project doesn't go well, it's going to affect their other businesses right across the street. So they're not, I really feel like we can trust that they've really spent their time and they're putting their risk in here because they really think it's going to be a good project. And I think they've taken the time and done their homework, and our consultants have done their homework. I feel really confident that though it's really hard to give a tax exemption when it's difficult financial times, and we always want more money in the budget, that this is really putting money where it's going to be used effectively. So,
Alan.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I really like this project. I appreciate the investment in downtown. I appreciate the downtown housing. I appreciate the outreach that the developers have done to the community and to the council. I like the density and that it helps us meet our climate recovery ordinance, greenhouse gas reduction goals, and more livable communities. I like the commercial and the hotel, and I think it's a good design. And I appreciate the willingness to meet all the MUPD requirements, like the 10% increase in energy efficiency, 71% of the dollars stay local with local firms, ensuring compliance with contractor and minority and women-owned business rules, 10% to affordable housing. They're all really good public benefits. I was disappointed in the lack of no EV charging, because there's not a requirement for EV charging ready areas because of the lack of requirement for parking. The future is going to be all about EVs, and it's a mistake not to construct that now when it's cheap to do, because you're going to be doing it later and it's just going to be more expensive. So hopefully you guys take that into consideration if you move forward. So having said all that, my problem is with the need part and the but for MUPD, this project would not be built test. And it's $4.3 million over 10 years. It's a significant amount of money. When we revised the program, I continually bumped up against this problem. And how could you tell if the project really needs it? How do you know it's not just a government giveaway? And my problem is that you can't tell definitively with any certainty. And I have a pretty strong background in project development and financing. And so depending on the assumptions for a MUPD application would determine whether or not it needs it or not. And I proposed a solution for this dilemma the first time around we were doing the revisions, which was a look-back provision, where at the end of the first year and every year after that, you looked at the actuals and determined the rate of return, and you limit it to 10%. If it was more than 10%, we shared the saving, or shared the benefit. And therefore, we could get public benefit and they could get their rate of return, and we wouldn't have to have this conversation, because we would just say up to 10%, we're good. And so that problem still exists. And as a result, I haven't voted for any MUPDs except for Capstone, which had so many problems that it actually resulted in a 2.5-year review and a substantial revision of the criteria. Another good example of how this need test is the 2 projects on Franklin Boulevard that were built. The hub got a MUPD, and it passed the but-for test. Which was, I voted against it. The project, like a stone's throw away, of course, you'd have to have Herbert's arm to be able to throw that far, but a stone's throw away, project was built, almost carbon copy, and it didn't need a MUPD, and it's being built. As it stands now, I just cannot definitively tell if this is a need or not. And I'd like to, but I can't. And I can't say this project passes the MUPD test. I can't say it's not just a giveaway. If we could fix that problem, I could see myself supporting this project or future MUPD projects, but in the lack of clarity around that problem, this is going to continue to be a very controversial thing and probably not get my support because it's just too difficult to tell whether or not it's needed or not.
Okay, I have a couple of people in the queue for a second round, but I want to comment on a couple of things I've heard and reinforcing that we have a goal to create density downtown, and it is hard to build that density, and the MUPD is one of the tools that we have in our toolbox. We have a housing tools and strategies project going on. We're looking at the MUPD again. It is intended for this kind of moment. I think in response to comments about empty storefronts, we're planning to, this will bring people downtown who will provide customers for those storefronts and presumably spur some retail development, and that this building is part of a larger development, which is a huge economic boon to our downtown. So I think we're only looking at this one project, but it is part of a larger picture, and I'm not sure what would happen if this piece came out of the puzzle. What happens to the rest of that picture? So that's a little concerning to me as we talk about it as a separate piece. We have to. I also just want to say when Council revised the MUPD in 2015, they created a panel of 10 people who could delve into the details here, presumably so you wouldn't be shooting from the hip, or you would reduce the amount of sort of speculation that you were doing as a council because you could rely on this panel of 10 and the outside review to help you make a decision. So I guess I would caution you around just pretending that that's not there and that somehow advice was not thoughtfully offered to you. And so it seems to me that all 10 people are suggesting a MUPD is required, and the debate is only how many years it's required. But that hasn't really been an issue with your advisory panel or with the city consultants, hired consultants. So just put that out there, that you have advisors for a reason, and sometimes it's good to kind of give that some weight in your considerations. And with that, I will turn it over to Claire. Did you want a second round? No, you're good. Okay, so Mike wants a second round.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I spent an awful lot of time in conversation with George Brown when we did this and added the workforce housing provisions and all of the other pieces to try and build something that would work. And I heard Betty's comment that it isn't up to us to take a risk. And I hear Alan's comment that how can you ever really tell for certain with the but-for argument. Those seem to me like structural defects in the idea of a MUPD, and I know there's plenty of people who share them. There's plenty of people who share the idea that there's a bad idea no matter how you slice it. I'm not a huge fan of MUPD as a tool. But we as a council made a decision not just on how to reform this so that it has public benefit, but on the idea of using it as a tool. We decided very much we absolutely wanted this as a tool in the toolbox because the alternative requires other actions by state law. So I would ask Denny if I'm sitting here, okay, we're going through the process of Envision Eugene, and we're doing the multifamily housing analysis, and we don't have this tool, how would that affect the land that we would have to expand the UGB in order to accommodate if we don't have an ability to incentivize multifamily, especially in the core, because we know nothing's actually been built in 20 years, the market doesn't do it. So if we can't incentivize it, what happens?
I'll start by with the assumption for those 1,000 units that we have that we hope to get achieved downtown is we assume that those 1,000 units, as I recall, would need some incentive to actually move forward. They weren't going to happen on their own. And so I think if your question is if we had no incentives,
correct,
and those 1,000 units didn't happen, what would happen?
Correct.
And my sense is you've already figured out the answer.
Yes, sir.
But it would be 1,000 more units that we'd have to put somewhere. That's the idea.
Yeah. and we might have to add land in order to do it to the UGB in the process and/or affect neighborhoods really differently in how we're dealing with this. Point is, we've decided we're going to have this incentive. We've decided we're going to have MUPD because it's a good idea and it's better than the alternatives that are more costly to the community in the way we want to run the place. So as long as we have it, as near as I can see, if you were to pick the very best attributes of a MUPD application that you'd want to see with a local developer doing it and all the best, you know, looks to an application, this looks an awful lot like that to me. So I'm happy to support it.
Okay, Betty.
Just one question. Have they asked to have the SDCs waived? They would be paying SDCs.
Yeah, we don't have an SDC waiver provision. It would happen for the Homes for Good. The Homes for Good could ask for the SDC waiver, but not
this one.
Not a market
Thank you.
product. We don't have a program for that.
Okay, any other last minute comments? So we have a choice of voting on this today or delaying. I just like a little heads up. Well, let's see, can I get some head nods? Are you prepared to vote today, or do we have a majority who don't?
No.
Yes, Mike, speak to it.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Make the motion. I move to adopt resolution attachment G to approve the tax exemption.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Emily?
I don't feel that I can make a well-thought-out decision with this much time, and I really don't want to vote on it today. If I do vote on it today, it's going to be a no. So I'd really like a little more time to do some investigating. And so I move to postpone this vote for a week.
A second.
Okay. I want to just ask clarification. Are there timeline considerations around how long we could postpone? Will a week throw us off in any way?
A week won't throw us off.
Okay. So we could postpone this vote to, what's a week, the 24th? We have a joint session. I don't want to do it on the 24th. Could we do it on the 22nd? Would 5 more days give you enough?
No.
Mike, go for it.
I don't need to do that. I don't know if that vote on this amendment would pass. But my question is of the city attorney. Is that a vote to postpone to a date certain? Is that what I just heard? That's not a tabling?
That's correct. She gave, 1 week is a date
Right.
certain, and we're also
That-
looking to actually get a very, very certain date.
Right. So I would vote against that because I don't imagine that, I mean, with all the efforts that these particular folks have done to help everybody be educated about their application, I don't imagine I will learn anything new about this in the next week. I think I will know exactly what I know now after a pretty thorough review of the circumstance. So I won't be voting in favor of doing that.
So if you had a date certain, a week from today is a joint planning commission meeting, so probably would not recommend it then. The next one would be the 31st of October. The 2 items right now are climate action plan update, River Road Santa Clara update. The next available meeting after that would be November 13th.
I would not want to put it out that far, I don't think.
13 sounds good.
Okay, so I guess my just sort of offer is if 5 more days and we could vote on this on October 22nd, would that give you enough time to do additional review?
I don't think it would. I think this is really complicated. From my research, we don't have to decide until January. So I want to give them the faster time. The 31st, Betty and Chris won't be here.
Right, that's the other problem.
So,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
the 14th says TBD.
14th of November. Yeah, I would rather not put it out for a month, but manager?
All I was going to say, timing I do think matters in these kinds of things. And probably legally, it doesn't have to be done until perhaps the date that you mentioned, Emily. The difficulty, of course, for them will be having certainty to be able to move forward on their planning, development, and actually breaking ground sooner than later. And I know that's what they're anxious for, to capture the what they can with that. And so that's the one risk about putting out further is their ability to move forward on the project.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to delay for a week, and I guess we'll just vote on that. Oh, Betty, you want to speak to it?
Talk about it.
Okay.
I think the advantage is we could hear more from the minority group on the panel. We could learn more about who else was on the panel. We could hear more from the public who now will know after there's news about this meeting what we're planning. And many of them don't know at this point. And I don't think they'd be breaking ground before November. I know planning, but I think they've already done that. I don't know, but anyway, November 13th sounds like a good date to me.
Yeah, Emily.
I really like this project. I would really like to see it happen, just like I wanted to build the house for the Measure 49. I need to know that all of the requirements are really met. So I don't want a tax exemption. I don't want to take that much money from the general fund, but I will consider it with some more information. And I think it's reasonable to ask for the time for me to have a well-informed and a well-thought-out vote. So that's why I would like to give myself and whoever else feels they need it a little bit more time. When I did go meet with the OBs, they said that a week wouldn't really hurt them. So I understand the 14th seems too far. I don't really know what else to suggest. But 5 days just doesn't feel like enough.
Well, I can't schedule it a week from now. So we'll vote on a week, but will we have to vote on it next week if we vote on that?
If it's moved to postpone to, yes, then you will. And then, since it's a joint session, you could also vote to tack on another half hour. I mean, you can.
Okay. All right. We may have to do that.
Does it have to be that date? Do we have to be date certain?
Based on your motion, you are moving to.
I didn't know what date,
Yeah, absolutely. So you can say move to postpone. You could use November 13th to the next available meeting, but I would say make it a date certain. So if you want to change your motion to move to postpone to November 13th or to the Monday, I think you're saying that's too quick, or the 31st, even though a couple people will be gone. I mean, those are the kind of four options. So Monday, the 22nd, the motion that you currently have, which will create a.
That's true. I think Betty and Chris are gone on the 31st.
On the 31st. Moving it out to the November 13th. The 24th, we'll just need to have more discussion about what that means regarding either they will shorten, it won't be a full 90 minutes with the Planning Commission, or council can extend their meeting by a certain amount to make sure that we can take action if your motion passes. Okay.
Well, I don't think it's going to pass, so I'll gamble the 5 days. I'll take the 5 days over nothing.
Okay, so you want to change?
I'll change it to the 22nd, is that what it is? Yeah, the 22nd.
Is that acceptable to the 2nd?
I prefer longer, but I'll do too.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion on the table is right now is to postpone the vote until Monday, October 22nd.
Perfect. Okay. Do we have to vote to substitute? Yeah, or no, we can.
Motion to postpone.
The motion to postpone. The motion to postpone. So all in favor of postponing the vote? 1, 2, 3. Okay, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that goes down. So now we're ready to vote on the motion itself. All in favor?
We get to discuss this.
Oh, well, sure. Okay.
I just want to be really clear that I really like this project, and I really feel I'm being forced to vote before I'm ready. So I want that to be clear. I do like it. I'm not going to vote for it.
Okay.
Ready? I also like the project, but I'm going to vote no.
All right. Okay, that said. Oh, yeah, go for it.
We're having a disruption during the meeting at the moment.
We can proceed.
Well, and I appreciate that, but my question is this. Is that appropriate for us to just ignore it and pretend it's not happening for what someone might do tomorrow? I don't think it is. I wanted to say that as a procedural issue.
That is fine, but I'm choosing to proceed. So all in favor of the motion on the table? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. 1, 2, 3, so it passes. Thank you all very much. That closes that issue. Thank you for that discussion. And now we are ready for a discussion on a temporary day center and Dusk to Dawn pilot.
Ready?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just give a really quick overview. We're not asking you to take action today, knowing it's pretty quick, but it is an important and timely and urgent discussion. And so you can also choose to take action on Monday if you would like to do that as well. I think all of you know that the challenges of with unhoused in our community has been difficult for just years, and we're continually looking for places for people to be safe and secure, and particularly as winter approaches. And we've been looking for many, many weeks for a location in which we can locate a temporary dusk to dawn and day center as winter approaches. And after looking at all the various spaces, the place that we believe best meets that at the moment is on the current City Hall block. And we don't have a full design of that. It would be managed and controlled. Our thinking and intent would be to have, similar to the Dusk to Dawn out on 99, that we would actually have a shelter for that, particularly as winter approaches, that we do appropriate safety and access portions to the site. I had a chance to meet with Steve Mokrahysky yesterday. What I would say is I really appreciate his continuing interest in being a strong partner with the city on any numbers of things, to include the challenges with homelessness. And they're engaged in many ways, as you know, in this discussion. And so we had a good conversation about how we could make this work. As you know, we're in the midst of property transactions. We could work through the details of that. That can get worked out legally. And so what we're really looking for today is you can choose to go ahead and say, yes, proceed on this particular block. We'd still come back on Monday with fuller details. If you want to wait for details, we'll come back on Monday with fuller details at that time, and then you can choose to proceed. We recognize this is intended to be temporary. It's not intended to be the forever place. But at the same token, we do feel a sense of urgency, particularly as winter approaches, to provide safe and secure places. And so we're putting that out there for you for your consideration.
Excellent. I really appreciate this. I know this has been challenging to try and find an appropriate location. I have Betty in the queue. Anybody? Oh, and Alan. Go for it, Betty.
Before Mike.
You did.
I think it's a great idea. People have mentioned this to me, and I've mentioned it before. Why not use that space temporarily, at least? I don't think it's a solution, but it's a temporary solution. And I do think it's urgent. I have been very cold when I'm walking my dog at 7 in the morning lately, and when I'm out there, I think about the people who are outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea as well, depending on the details. I've been talking about this for a long time, actually, as a proposal, so I support it. If we come back with some details on Monday about size, what does it look like? What are the, I mean, when we did rest stops, we have rules about those in terms of size, toilets, garbage, governance, and so all those details I would suspect you're going to come back with on Monday. And you did say you talked to the county and they're okay with doing this on a temporary basis.
Yeah, I've talked with Steve. I haven't talked with any of the commissioners. I assume he will visit with his commissioners. He and I had a very good conversation about how we could make this work as we move through the winter. As you know, they're very interested also in starting to gather support for a justice center on that particular block as we consummate our deal, and so we're conscious about that and want to be supportive of that, but at the same time, he's a very good partner in trying to make this work as well.
Great. So, yeah, because that might take 10 years to do, so. That might be temporary, might be a long time.
But I should say it really is intended to be temporary where we find more permanent, a more permanent location.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Okay.
I've also said that we do need more temporary locations, more rest stop locations, more Emerald Village locations, and I still think it's a really good idea to take a page out of the affordable housing book and do the dispersed housing model that they have, that in each ward we have some of these. Right now they're all in Claire's ward, except for one, which is doing, I don't hear much about it at all because it works exceptionally well. So I think spreading that out over the city and focusing our efforts to have one in each ward at least would be something that we should take a serious look at.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you. Well, thank you, City Manager, for doing a lot of hard work to try to find a location that could be viable. I support this location that you've chosen. I think it's logical use of an unused piece of property that we, at this point, fully control. And we definitely need to be finding alternative locations for folks who are currently having to find themselves without shelter. So I'm definitely eager to hear more details about, operational, how it would work operationally, how it would look, and recognize that it's temporary, but, giving that relief is part of a necessary response to us, from us towards folks in our community. You don't necessarily have to answer this right now, but would like to have some information about how folks will be brought onto the site or encouraged to come to the site, and for instance, would be thinking that folks who are downtown right now would be given priority, or folks who are in Skinner Butte Park. Kind of how do we think about, because obviously we have more folks out there than we could accommodate on this one location. So thank you for the hard work in bringing this forward to us.
Okay. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you. I also want to thank you and your staff for working on this. It's not easy to find a location. There used to be one in Ward 4. It's not there anymore. It had to be moved. But what I learned was, even though there was some initial resistance, once it went in, it was organized and taken care of, and the folks interacted with the neighborhood very well. There were no problems at all. And I think this program has shown how successful it can be. And having one downtown during the winter especially, I think is going to be a real benefit for everyone. So I'm really excited about this. I did want to ask, are we intending to have a nonprofit manage it? And have you identified them yet? Or?
We've been working, for example, with St. Vincent de Paul. They currently manage the first Dusk to Dawn, which is actually in Greg's ward. So he also is, his ward is participating in this dispersal property, or this dispersal program. So we've talked with them as a possibility, and so we'll continue to work with them. We haven't nailed anything down, and that's what we would want to try to do over the next several days before we come back to you with some details. So there's lots of details to fill in. We just don't have them all this afternoon.
Right. Thank you.
Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jennifer. That was my first question, exactly that, who was going to run it. I'm not crazy about the idea of this particular location. I think that the jokes about our new city hall are going to come fast and furious. So that's only just a small part of the consideration. My disagreement about it as the right place is for other concerns. I did have one other question, though. As a while back, I had heard a rumor, and I was hoping you could dispel it for me, that there was consideration of moving police personnel out of another location downtown in order to create another camp. Is there any truth there?
We've looked at any numbers of places to include 2nd and Lincoln. that doesn't work. There's some fatal flaws in that. And so we've looked at numbers of locations to try to finally get to a place that feels most reasonable and most accommodating.
Thank you, sir.
Emily?
Thank you. I am thrilled. I'm going to bring it up, mentioned this idea to you for 3 solid years. So great job. I'm excited as can be, in spite of the eye rolls. I'm ready to support it today, as anybody would have guessed. I'm really thrilled that you're ready to work on it quickly with determination. If we can vote for MUPTI today, we can vote for this quickly. I'm wondering if it includes a day center, because I didn't just hear that this time, because one of my challenges is people downtown in the daytime who have nowhere to go.
It does, and this is, we think, is a good opportunity actually to pilot that idea, because as you know, as part of our community safety program, what you've approved going forward so far has been day center funding. And so this is an opportunity to pilot that concept, and so we think there could actually be some nice synergy in that. So the answer is yes.
Awesome. Have you asked the merchants about it? Because when I, some time ago, was promoting this idea, I got pretty intense feedback that that was a horrible place, that people coming into town would see it first. I tried to explain that it didn't have to be ugly, it wasn't near residences, and the other choice is to have them downtown. So yes, let's do that.
So I can just briefly about, we have had a chance to talk to some people within the business community. As you would expect, some people are neutral, some would prefer it not to be there. I think some would say, okay, for now, that's probably the best spot. As far as design, our intent will be really a couple of things. One, to make it safe, accessible, a place that people can have some dignity as well, but also to provide it as a way that it's it can fit into the fabric of our downtown as much as we're able to do that. And so that's our intent as well.
I think that's exactly how I analyze it too. I'd really like to see Greg's work session on rest stop locations get back on the agenda. If we're going to have one in every ward, and we've had such a hard time finding them to fit the parameters we have now, I'd like to see us discuss those parameters ASAP. Again, I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. It is a crisis. And when we approve it, I will do the happy dance again. Thank you.
Greg?
Yeah, just a couple things. John, how many people do you think that this site would accommodate? Do you have an idea?
We don't yet. That's going to have to be part of the conversation, particularly whoever is controlling and managing the site. We would want to have that conversation with them. And so I wouldn't want to guess at the moment.
Okay.
I just don't know.
And the second question is that during this period of time, and we're talking about basically the winter months for this, is there a way that we can work with the county to, and I know that we're doing that now, but to be more definitive about how we site and put together a low barrier shelter option off of this model? It may not be at this location, but at some other location to be determined.
So the answer is yes, and the report that you received last Wednesday in that joint meeting, that TAC report, I had a chance to meet with that group prior to the meeting, knowing I wasn't going to be at the meeting. I think they've done really nice work, and the recommendations coming out of those, I think, are pretty intriguing. One includes a low barrier shelter, and so I think it will be a really good discussion around this table on how do we move forward on sort of, I think, the whole constellation of things that they're recommending in there, along with the county and our partners. And so the answer, I think, is yes, that we can start moving forward on that. The other piece that plays into that, you might remember that $1 million set aside, and the direction that you've given to us is to come back to the council with a recommendation on how to best use that $1 million. One data point is the TAC report. There could be some other data points as well that we use to come back with those recommendations. So all that we hope will occur over the next several months. And the county, as I say, is very engaged in these conversations that we have with their staff.
Claire, second
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate Councilor Semple mentioning Councilor Evans' work session on rest stops. I would also like to see that back on the agenda. And I did want to mention that I much prefer this location over some of the ones that the city manager had mentioned to me that were under consideration, one of which was Washington Jefferson Park. I think the use of our parks in general and that park in particular actually represents a real conflict with other residents who have an expectation of being able to use their parks as parks. And so I know that other councilors at this table have mentioned Washington Jefferson Park as a great place. It is actually very discomforting to me to have parks in my ward offered up for homeless camps by other councilors at the table. I wouldn't do that to other councilors without speaking to them first. And I know that constituents who live near Washington Jefferson would very much appreciate having this dusk till dawn and day center use available to folks who are unsheltered, but not having it located in their Washington Jefferson Park. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that.
Respond.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I apologize. I'm the one who said it, and because it was the birthday of Occupy, I really meant it a little tongue-in-cheek. And I so appreciate Whitaker housing and coming forth, and I really would like to relieve that on Whitaker. So my apologies to Whitaker. I was not. It was tongue-in-cheek.
Thank you. Very accepted.
Great. So thank you all. It sounds like we're good with not making any, waiting for definitive information coming back from you, but my sense of the crew is everybody is very supportive of this idea and appreciative of the work. Save one. Save one. So we'll talk about this on Monday with a little more detail, and that's excellent. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.
Where's it going to fit in?